thank you very much for coming to this beautiful Sunday feast. Today we're celebrating the disappearance of Nandalal Mataji. She left us and she has joined Krishna in his eternal pastimes in the spiritual world of Srila Prabhupada. This is a great occasion for us because we do not lament when devotees leave their bodies. We celebrate. We know from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, when Haridas Thakur left the planet, then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu picked the body of Haridas Thakur and he was dancing in spiritual ecstasy on the streets of Jagannath Puri. And hundreds and thousands of devotees were singing and chanting and dancing, and tears of ecstasy were rolling down everyone's faces. Why? Because Haridas Thakur was very dear to Krishna, very dear to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So when devotees leave this planet, we actually celebrate because they're with Krishna, they're ahead of us. They've gone back to Krishna and joined Krishna in his eternal pastimes in the spiritual world. So it is a great privilege and honor for us to hear about the glories and the activities of Nandalal Mataji and her service and commitment, because many of you may not know that when you glorify a Vaishnava, Krishna is very pleased. There is nothing more pleasing to Krishna when you hear the glorification of his devotees. She had given up her material life at the age of 16, that I am told, and taken this mission of Srila Prabhupada till the very last breath. So it's an incredible journey of dedication and surrender to Srila Prabhupada. And we'll hear from different devotees that have known her for many years, and that have come in contact with her and were inspired by her life and her teachings. So I'm going to let Sikhi Pichadhari Prabhu, who's emceeing this program, to take over from here.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So, in the back here, this is Susan. You see here? This is Nandalal's daughter. And if you ever saw Nandalal, when you first saw Susan, you were shocked because the resemblance is striking. Like twin sisters. So I asked Susan an important question, was when did Nandalal come to Krishna consciousness? And it was in Seattle when she was approximately 24. So from 16 to 24, there's not much really known. A little bit of known, but not much. So she joined in 1969. and got initiated in 1970. And Prabhupada, she was afraid to go and see Prabhupada, like all of us, because Prabhupada was so dynamic, and when you were in his presence, you felt that, you were really just a small little soul in the material world. And this person was able to help you come out of the material world. When I first met Prabhupada, I couldn't even look at him. I kept my eyes on the ground. And he said to me, Brahmanas don't smoke cigarettes. And everybody started laughing. And I said, I wanted to crawl out of there. And I'd just come off the street, So he knew who I was, like he knew everyone else. So, Alvaro, do you have anything you want to say? Sure. Okay. Susan? Okay, Susan.
Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vanchakalpa Talubhascha Kripasnadevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So I only got to know Nandalal just a few years ago. And specifically, I was working with a devotee company up in Calhoun, Georgia. And she was living in Rome, Georgia. So she actually reached out to me first, and we started communicating. And the only thing we ever talked about was her desire to preach in Rome, Georgia. Now, those of you who are from Georgia, you understand Rome is kind of far out on the other side of the planet of Georgia. It's a nice place, but I don't know how she ended up there. I have no idea. Maybe you can tell some stories. I have no idea how she ended up in Rome, Georgia. But there in Rome, Georgia, she was trying her best to preach. And Daswara Sutra Prabhu just confirmed that it's a very difficult place to preach, because there's gangs there and all kinds of difficult situations. But she was determined. So at one point she had started a program, and a few people started coming to her house, and she was telling me about the ones who were coming, and they were cooking. And really her voice and her intonation was attracting me to come there, because the way she talked about prasadam, or spiritual food, was so attractive. And how they were cooking this and cooking that, and every time she said, I should go there. But I was unfortunate, never got a chance to go visit her program. But another thing that she was so determined to do, and this relates to all the Srila Prabhupada disciples, she was so determined to create this website where the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, their memories, their lives, not just memories of Prabhupada, but there are many, many places you can hear about Prabhupada, but the lives of the devotees who served Prabhupada, that's what she wanted to emphasize. And she kept telling me all these different things she was trying to do, trying to raise money. Everything was so difficult for her, because although she's a senior Prabhupada disciple, outside of the senior devotees who know her, no one knew her. But she didn't care about that. Her desire was to capture the memories of Prabhupada's disciples, their life and progression in Krishna consciousness, just like C.P. Pujari just said. You know, he met Prabhupada and this happened and that happened. She wanted to capture all that before we all leave. Just like Srila Prabhupada wanted to complete the Srimad Bhagavatam, which he didn't get to do before he left this planet. So his dear disciple, Mother Nandalal, or Nandalal Prabhu, I have to say, she wanted to capture all this powerful nectar, because in the lives of the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, there's incredible experiences, incredible stories to be heard. And that was her desire. So I think that, I don't know, amongst my godmothers and godsisters, I was really impressed with that about your mother. That she was not so concerned about herself and her age and her health. She just wanted to capture it. Because this movement is history, approaching 50 years. It's an amazing history. And it's not all just about Prabhupada. It's about how Prabhupada affected the lives of these hundreds and thousands of people, and at least tens of thousands of his disciples. So I give great respect to Mother Nandalal. Although I said I only got to know her personally for a couple of years, but those few years were impactful. So she left me with this sort of a spirit to do things like that. In fact, I started the website because I was inspired by her to capture all the melodies of Prabhupada, and I talked to her about that. And she gave me her blessing. She says, a very good idea, Bhagavan, you should just do it. So I'm very thankful to her, and I'm so happy to get to meet you, and hopefully we'll get to know each other better. And please know that your mother was dearly loved in this community especially, and around the world. So, Mother Nandalal Dasi Ki Jai.
Hare Krishna, everybody. Come to Hari, would you like to say something?
Yes, Nandalal Prabhu was an extraordinary devotee, Srila Prabhupada disciple. I don't know exactly how long, but I know she lived in Vrindavan, India, at least, 20 years? Maybe it was 22 years. And that was at a time when it was most austere, and there were not the accommodations that there are nowadays when devotees decide to go to Maya course, like going to the Bahamas or something. But she was there when it was not the avant-garde thing to do. And I heard Siki was mentioning that she was the first ISKCON devotee to do Dandavat Parikram around Govardhan Puja, the first American ISKCON devotee to do that. You know, only the Indians had done that prior. So that was amazing. You know, she was, for a female, right, especially, I mean, she was bold for Prabhupada, bold for Krishna. Her convictions were strong. She was short, feisty, high-spirited, had great determination, and she was so dedicated to Srila Prabhupada's mission. It was amazing, and just such an inspiration. I mean, yeah, she was such a long ways from us, and it was hard to get together, but often her and I would talk on the telephone. And she always just had so many ideas, and she was brilliant. I mean, her intelligence was amazing. And very resourceful, in spite of the fact that she had so little finances, living on a fixed income, had little bad eyesight, couldn't make it down here for the Sunday feast because driving back in the dark. But as Balabhadra Prabhu said, that she did so much stuff on the internet to inspire devotees and wanting to capture the memoirs and all the pastimes that devotees had, Prabhupada disciples, their loving interactions with Srila Prabhupada. Another thing she had done in spite of her age, she was still going to school. She wanted to learn about permaculture. I have a tendency to call it permaculture. So it's that too. But permaculture, you know, all the gardening, and not only had she taken this extremely lengthy course on the internet, but she had gone to Kentucky, where they have a farm project, to help them lay out their land of their project, to know what to plant where, and trees, and so on and so forth, that it would be the most advantageous to the community. And likewise, she, you know, in spite of, like, she didn't really like to travel very far, she also went to the Mississippi farm. And she had shared with me the fact, you know, that's like a hurricane valley where the temple is in Mississippi. They have so many hurricanes. And she said, you know, Gandhari, if they planted certain shelter belts of bamboo, it can thwart a hurricane from demolishing the buildings on the property. So she was helping them plan out their whole layout. You know, she went there, surveyed it, and then, you know, had blueprints, coming back and was, you know, doing presentations for them. So I know 2 projects she was doing it, and I think there was a 3rd farm that she was involved in. So anyhow, it is really a great loss for all of us that she's not here with us to help to inspire and guide us and to continue to add to Srila Prabhupada's movement. So somehow or another we have to carry on the work. She really is a great source of inspiration. And like Siki said, I mean, she left 2 beautiful children. What is the son's name? Stephen and Susan. And like Siki said, Susan is a replica of Nandalal without the bite. Because Nandalal was a bit feisty. And he said Susan is just a personification of sweetness. And in a little bit of time I spent with her, she really sends out that vibration. She's a beautiful person.
Hare Krishna. I've known about Nandalal for about 40 years, but I only met her about 25 years ago. She lives in the Vrindavan area, Kusum Sarovar and Govardhan Hill at Govindakund for about 18 years, 1977 to about 95. So, but she came back before 95, and so I knew her from the early 90s. And like everybody's been saying, she's very, very feisty and outspoken. Her whole history in ISKCON is lots of being asked to leave a number of temples many times. Because whenever she felt that something was being mismanaged, she always spoke out loudly and got in lots of trouble. She joined it in '69 at age 28, and she was told, "You're too old to get married." Because the devotees were like 20, 22, 18, so somebody joining at 28 is considered really old. So, let's see, in LA she was assistant to Karandar, the president. She was, because she's a good right-hand person for running around, getting things done, delivering messages, and stuff like that. And then, let's see, she met Prabhupada again in Hawaii about '74. Actually, I have a letter. Prabhupada's telling her that he's going to come. So Srila Prabhupada gave her a deity of Gopal. She thought of, this was in LA, she thought of a brilliant question to ask Srila Prabhupada, and she cannot remember what the question was. I have to ask Srila Prabhupada this question. So she asked Karandar, and Karandar said, yeah, you can come in and ask Prabhupada. So she was like terrified that the answer was yes. So she went in there in Srila Prabhupada's room alone with him and bowed down. And before she could open her mouth to ask the question, Prabhupada said, "You take Gopal." He pointed to his desk, and it was a 3-inch tall silver deity. He said, you can worship him anywhere, even under a tree. Which she did a few years later in Vrindavan. Took that deity out, and Prabhupada said, "You just put a little cloth, you carry him in a bag, and you can just worship him anywhere." So then in let's see, in Hawaii, there was some political controversy was happening, and she, of course, was getting into trouble. The buildings were on stilts, so at some point she had spies sneaking under her room to overhear her conversations, because she was rocking the boat. But when Srila Prabhupada came there in '74, he looked out the window, he saw her chanting peacefully under the banyan tree. So that he was having a heated discussion with some of the men leaders that were having, some controversy. So Prabhupada yelled at them. He said, "Why can't you be like her? Look at her, chanting peacefully. Why can't you do like that?" Because he saw her out the window, and she saw him, and she bowed down. She was under the banyan tree. So then she was there for Srila Prabhupada's disappearance in November 1977 in Vrindavan. Now, Tamal Krishna Goswami had asked her to clean Prabhupada's rooms. So she was the only female person, like, in the rooms with Prabhupada during his, he was on his deathbed. So when it looked like Prabhupada was going to be leaving his body, more and more men were coming in the room, and women were standing outside. So some of the women, they saw in the window that Nandalal was in there. And so she was like, so the women started filing in very, very meekly. And some of the men were getting uncomfortable, like, oh, he's going to come in there. But they couldn't make a fuss because, sacred atmosphere of Prabhupada. So she was present when Prabhupada left his body, left this world. And then afterwards, the temple management said, all single women must move out of the temple. So she decided, well, instead of living in some ashram with the other women, I'm just going to wander off by myself and live in Vrindavan. So she shaved her head, just like a sadhu, just like these guys here, you see, shaved with the shika in the back. So she did like that, and lived like a sadhu. First at Kusum Sarovar, and then she moved to Govindakund, down on the south side of Govardhan. And she would go on Govardhan Parikrama by foot every day. And Mandari mentioned she did Dandavat Parikrama. Dandavat, so for Sue's benefit, Dandavat means like a stick. So you go like this. You have a little rock, and you bow down, full body length, and you put the rock there. Then you stand up and go over to where your rock is and pick it up and do it again. So she measured her body like that all the way around. How many miles? 11 miles. It took her 10 days to do that. Because you do, a section a day and then you go home, you get something to eat, and then you come back the next day and continue. So it took her 10 days to do that. First Western devotee to do that.
Wow.
So then, just briefly, just for some other stories. So when she came back to Atlanta, my family called her Nandalal, which is a combination of Linda Williams and Nandalal. And she also went by Daisy for about 5 or 10 years there, known as Daisy. She had a lawn care business, a store. She was a real estate agent for about 3 years. But as was mentioned, the last few years she got really fired up about putting this disciples database together. So, just one last quick story. Before '95, when she officially just stayed in America, she came and went a couple times. So once we were hanging out with her, she was preparing this giant box of things to take to India. I mean, huge, like a shipping crate. A washer and a dryer, and just all this household stuff. And we were like, you're nuts, you can't take all that stuff to India. What are you doing? So she had this huge box. Like, I can't even, my arms aren't big enough. She put all the stuff over there, and then sure enough, everything was gone. Everything was stolen. She came back with nothing. I was like, where is your big box and all your stuff and your washer and dryer? He said, well, gradually everything was stolen. But she had one story when she was walking around sadhu style. She sat under a tree to rest, and there was a Brijbasi boy who saw her there, and he ran over, milked his cow, and brought her the fresh milk very neatly. So her conclusion, and this is the end of my testimony, she concluded, and it's in writing. She said, whatever you bring to India will all be stolen, but whatever you need, the devotees will give to you.
Peter does?
Excuse me, I'll have to sit down. I got a knee problem. I only met Nandalal 3 or 4 times. We would go visit her in her house, me and Parampara. And I had known her history of being, like a yogini, bhakti yogini. And she spent her time alone in Govardhan, in the abode of Krishna's place of pastime. So Govardhan is a place where one takes shelter of the Lord. The Lord lifts the Govardhan hill, and everyone goes under. And once they're under the Govardhan hill, there's no more anxiety, there's no more suffering from heat or cold or hunger or thirst. Everything is taken care of, everything is very self-satisfied. So Nandalal definitely had some type of realization of this, that she was able to stay there for so long. And when we would visit her, she would just have a very simple life, and she would seem to be, she had a big garden. And I would think, how does, I do a garden myself every year, but she had one 3 times the size of my garden, and I thought, how could she have done this garden? This big garden, and she had, she was a very simple life, and a very sweet lady. We would sit and talk about Vrindavan. I had spent some time there. We were both there at the time when Srila Prabhupada left, but because the men and women were always separate, I didn't know her, she didn't know me. So I didn't know her when she was there. I submitted my memories to her a few times, and each time she said she didn't get them. So I said at the beginning, I didn't get them. I don't know how you say it. So the last time we saw her, me, myself, and Shankar, we went to her house, and she told us a story about how she would move from place to place in Govardhan. She stayed at this one place for a very long time, and she had a view of Govardhan Hill from her room. And she could worship Govardhan Hill just from her room. Because Govardhan Hill is considered to be Krishna himself. So when she's worshiping Govardhan Hill, she's just like she's worshiping the Lord himself. In Christianity, they have God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Ghost. So in Christian consciousness, God the Father is Krishna. God the Son is the preceptor, the Guru, and God the Holy Spirit is, that divine energy. So we always are worshiping like this. God is the Father, Krishna. So she had a very personal way of worshiping Krishna. And just before she had passed away, we've been having some bad weather. I think everyone remembered the cold weather we had this year. And it started to snow. So first I would message her on the Facebook. And she'd always answer the message, because she always was on the computer. So if I sent her a message immediately, she'd be, hello, how are you? And we would start talking by messenger. And then I think we actually called. But maybe it was all done by messenger, but it seemed like we were talking. And it was on a Saturday, and I said, how are you? How was the snow? And she said, oh, it was just a dusting. I said, did you get it snowed in there? Because the news sounded like it was like 10 feet of snow. He said, oh no, it was just a dusting. She said, but I'm not feeling well. She said, I think I have the flu. She said she thought she had the flu, but really this was coming on and she didn't know what it was. So I said, I hope you feel better. And then we got snow again. I again messaged her, and this time she didn't answer. So then Prabhupada told me what happened, and then we started to pray for her. But I did a drawing that I'm working on right now, and I'm thinking we call it Nandalal Mukti, the liberation of Nandalal. And it's a picture of Nandalal, and she's laying in bed, and this young form of Nandalal comes out of her mouth, and then the servants of Krishna, the Vishnu Dutas, are taking her up, and then above them is Prabhupada and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and above them is Giridhari, lifting Govardhan Hill. So that's how I see that she's there. I know she's back in Govardhan, and that was her meditation. Towards the end, it says that great saints, as they're starting to leave their body, they go into what is called a samadhi, where they stop talking. They have no outside interaction with anyone. And it's all with internal, is they're meditating on Krishna and they're ready to leave. So it was very clear to us, devotees, her God brothers and God sisters, that Nandalal was practically already there with Krishna. She was there in her mind. She just had physically left it. But so this was a type of samadhi. We hear it of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He spent a few months like this in a room and we didn't talk to anyone. Srila Prabhupada, he spent like one day like this. One day we saw him in this type of situation. And Nandalal, how long? 5 or 6 days, a week. She was like this. So it's just in this period, just before Krishna takes the soul back to Godhead. Just before we we return back to our real place. Because it said that when we leave this body, it's like waking up in the morning. You wake up in the morning and go, wow, what a dream I had. It was such a big dream. So when we wake up out of this body, oh my God, and I thought this was my life. But the reality is this. The reality was not this world with all these people and all these relations. The real reality is never going to end, and that is our relationship with Krishna. When we wake up to the reality of back to home, back to our real place, back to where Krishna is, and we have a place there, and we're accepted by there because we become purified. You know, it's sometimes it describes that that if you want to purify water, you distill it. So we leave the spiritual world, we're completely pure, and as we come into action with this material world, we become contaminated. So the process of Krishna consciousness is how to purify ourselves so we can re-enter, we can return back to the spiritual world. And Nandalal, she was always thinking about the service. So they call this oneness. You know, there's a type of oneness people in India, they're always saying, sub ek, everything is one, this is one, that God is equal to this God, your religion is equal to mine, it's all one. But Prabhupada's definition of oneness isn't like this. Prabhupada's definition of oneness is that all of our desires that we have, we've given up, and we've made them into one desire, the happiness of Krishna, how to please Him. And when we have that removed, all other desires from our heart for self-happiness and just to please the Lord, then we can get real happiness. And this is what we call real oneness. And I know that she was always in this mood. So we don't have any bad, we know that she is in a very, very wonderful place with Srila Prabhupada and with Krishna. All glories to Nandalal.
Mother Jatira, you like to talk?
I feel a little foolish being up here because I didn't know Nandalal very well. I was an observer in Nandalal. We didn't have very many interactions because she was always very busy. She had a project, which I didn't understand, but she had a project. And I would see her just storming over to the temple to do her work. It was a very determined expression on her face. And so now I understand a little bit better.
Please. Parampara had a lot of connection with Nandalal and Ekadasi.
Panchagopurvisha, Vipasandu, Vyevacha, Bhaktanam, Bhaktanam, Vaishnava. Mother Nandalal Dasi was an amazing personality. By the grace of Sikhi Pichadari here, I was actually living up in Calhoun, Georgia a couple of years ago, working on experimental business, and it turns out that this senior devotee living just 20 minutes away, which I didn't know, but he found out when she contacted the temple here. And so we started contacting her, helping her with her house up there. She was constantly wanting to do a preaching center. Unfortunately, she had a very wonderful house that, like in this neighborhood back here, would be like a, $500,000, $1 million house. But in the neighborhood in which it was located, it was a silk purse and a sort of a war zone. She lived in a sort of a low-income side of town. Drug dealing was going on. Murders were constantly, happening on a regular basis. And so what Mother Nandalal did on that level, just in her interactions with the people around her, was to become sort of a community organizer. She had an amazing level of intelligence and organizing ability. And from the very first years of her career in Krishna consciousness, I believe she began in Los Angeles. She was Karundar Prabhu's secretary or administrative assistant in those days, which is pretty big time. Karundar is notable and famous within ISKCON for his work, the early work in ISKCON. She was in charge of the BBT for one day. Rameshwar got sick, and Karundar told her to go and man the office. And Rameshwar found out that Nandalal was in the office. He immediately came back to the temple and didn't want to lose his service. She had ongoing contact with Karundar Prabhu, by the way, who had actually, subsequently had left the association, the close association of devotees. But when his brother, who was also a devotee, passed on a year or so ago, she was, she contacted Karundar Prabhu and sort of intermediated between him and the other devotees, kind of kept friendly contact with him. Last summer, so she had this community organizer aspect, very active in just the ordinary community dealings there in Rome, Georgia. Last January, not this past January, but January 2014, she recruited me to help her bring boxes of Bhagavad Gitas to the city council meeting, and she got her name on the agenda. And she proceeded to present each member of the city council a copy of the Bhagavad Gita. Spoke for a few minutes there, and like a presentation. It was all recorded in the minutes of the official history of the city of Rome, Georgia. That Linda Williams came and presented the city council, wishing them well and wishing them inspiration in their work on behalf of the people. So, dynamic, innovative, bold. So that was that thing, and she was always hounding the police to come and patrol the neighborhood, to do their job, reporting what was going on. She actually did the work of actually finding out where the drug dealers lived, got their names, got the addresses, turned them in to the authorities. She was a notable person in the neighborhood. And so that's on that level. On another level, last summer, she decided she was two main things that she was involved here in the last couple of years. Constantly wanting the farm communities, ISKCON to develop its farm communities. It is part of Prabhupada's vision. It was part of, Prabhupada said it was the second half of his mission that he had left to accomplish when he left. And so she became absorbed in that. And initially she thought, well, maybe I'll establish a farm up here. So she tried to recruit a little help among the Indian families up there, and that didn't work out so successfully. So still with that idea in mind, she decided to take a permaculture course. Permaculture is a sort of a scientific way of managing your land development, especially rural land development, productive land development, agricultural land development, where you analyze the land in terms of sort of like scientific, geological, water flow, water management, all this. It's a wonderful science. It originated in Australia from a fellow who was from Tasmania, and where our beloved Siki Pichadari also hails from. And so somehow or another, this all started maybe 40, 50 years ago. It's sort of like known among people that are ecology-minded, environmentalist-minded, permaculture. So you'll hear that. So she decided she's going to take this course and become a certified permaculture expert, consultant. so she could actually consult with his counterparts. So I helped her with that to pay for the fee, and several other people did too. And so she was taking this course online with a computer, and it was a massive amount of work. The lady's 75 years old. She's doing a massive amount of reading and studying and watching, videos of lectures and listening and writing and having to do all this coursework and laboratory preparatory work. And then she had the final thing was to actually do a permaculture plan for a location. So she got together with Adi Karta, and his wife had bought some land up in, I'm pointing up in Kentucky. Somewhere nearby, so I'm not sure where it was. And so she went there, visited there a couple of times, several times, spent a week or two there, and the friend of the devotees there as well, and analyzed it, turned in, was certified as a permaculture thing. Her second big thing, I'll just do real quickly, was a project to facilitate Srila Prabhupada's disciples, Srila Prabhupada's direct disciples, who are now in their later years of their life and are now, we're here regularly, are passing on, losing them one by one. She was finally very determined and desiring to facilitate those people to record their memoirs, record their memories, their experiences, how they became a devotee, what they went through, just as part of the record, part of the anecdotal history of this incredible movement that Srila Prabhupada started, and was fairly successful. She worked with different devotees at different times. There were already some people doing something like that, and then she formed with Hridayananda Maharaj's help through Brahma Tirthan, got her a super powerful, some terabyte computer to be able to manage the information. I mean, I'm kind of like little bite. This is some gigantic bite. And she was there, and she just became expert at, just self-taught. All these things are self-taught. She had the intellect, the drive to do these things and become expert, and then recruit help and network and recruit help to do it. And was successful in that, recording her own memoirs, which are astounding. I hope someone is in Dasra. Has he spoken yet? Yeah. So her experiences in the movement in India, living in India after Prabhupada departed, are amazing. She recorded those as well. And just an incredibly wonderful, amazing devotee, like all of Prabhupada's followers are. Thank you for hearing me.
Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Srivasadi Gauda Bhaktavrinda, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
So we've been hearing some wonderful stories and events in the life of Nandalal Devi Dasi. I met her for the very first time last year. At that time, Parampara approached me and he said, "You must meet Nandalal." I said, "Who's Nandalal?" He said, "She's a Srila Prabhupada disciple. She lives in Rome, Georgia, just a few hours away. She's an amazing devotee." So of course, Parampara, typically in this very enthusiastic, convincing way, convinced me that we should make a visit and see Nandalal Devi Dasi. So one Sunday afternoon, after the feast, Parampara, Pita, and myself, armed with prasadam and guarded from their lordships, drove to Rome, Georgia to meet Nandalal. As we approached the neighborhood where she lived, I was somewhat astonished. I was thinking, she lives in this particular neighborhood? Because the neighborhood was predominantly black, and you could sense that there could be some dangerous elements, and I was thinking, she lives in this particular neighborhood. And so as we proceeded to her house, which was very beautiful, she kept it immaculately clean, very, very organized. And we met her, and I realized this is a very, very extraordinary Vaishnavi. So of course, Pita and Parampara knew her, but because this was my very first time meeting her, there was more of an exchange between Nandalal and myself. She asked me how I joined the ISKCON movement. I briefly explained. She wanted to hear more. What were you doing before? How did you join? And I said, look, you're my senior god sister. I would like to know how you joined ISKCON. So she was a little taken aback because she thought, she knew that she was extremely talkative and convincing, but yet I was able to convince her to speak about herself. So she thought that was quite amazing. So she told me, she said, well, I can say many things. I said, well, at least tell me the first time you met Srila Prabhupada. And of course, the Daswarat Sutta, he alluded to the first time Nandalal met Srila Prabhupada. And yes, she said she was very nervous, but because her authorities convinced her, yes, go inside Srila Prabhupada's room, go see him. She said, well, I don't really have anything really to say. And she thought about something that maybe she'll ask Srila Prabhupada a question. So she said, as soon as she entered Srila Prabhupada's room and offered her respectful obeisances, before there was any kind of formal introduction or anything, Srila Prabhupada said to her, why should you marry a man of this world? Why should you marry a man that has a material body, subjected to birth, old age, disease, and death? And Nandalal said she wasn't even thinking of marriage, but Srila Prabhupada just said that to her. So she thought that was quite interesting. And Srila Prabhupada, as he was sitting at his desk, he kept gazing at a small silver deity of Krishna that was on the desk. And he told Nandalal, marry Krishna. Accept Krishna as your husband. And he kept gazing at the deity. And then at one point, Nandalal said Srila Prabhupada was gesturing with his hand, like for her to take the deity. So finally, Srila Prabhupada said, yes, take the deity, worship him, marry Krishna, accept him as your husband. Now, this is a very interesting and instructive point. In our process of bhakti, devotional service, there are 6 symptoms of sharanagati, or surrender. Anukul yasya sankalpa, to accept that which is favorable for advancing in Krishna consciousness. Pratikul yasya varjanam, and to reject those things which are unfavorable for one's advancement. Rakshisyatiti vishvaso, to have firm faith that Krishna, or the Supreme Lord, is one's protector. Gopritve, varanamyata, and to be convinced that Krishna, God, is one's guardian. Atma nikshepa kardapanya, to be prepared to offer everything to the Supreme Lord and to always cultivate humility and meekness. Sadvidam sharanagati. These are the 6 symptoms of surrender. So the fact that Srila Prabhupada encouraged Nandalal to accept Krishna as your provider, your husband, depend upon him, as your maintainer, that instructive is actually universal. All of us should apply that and see that, yes, it is a fact. The Supreme Lord is essentially our maintainer, our provider, our supreme guardian, etc. So when Srila Prabhupada requested Nandalal to take that small silver deity of Krishna, she took it very gratefully, and she exited the room. So I asked her, I said, did you begin worshiping the deity? She said, yes, but I didn't know exactly how I should worship this deity form of the Lord. So Nandalal said she wrote Srila Prabhupada a letter. How to worship the deity form of the Lord. And Srila Prabhupada wrote back to her just general instructions like offering flowers, incense, etc. Then at one point, Nandalal, in the course of talking to me, Pita and Parampara, she said that she noticed on that small deity, there was like a mark, almost like a small hole. And she just thought, should I continue worshiping this deity with this small, what she considered like a defect, like a small hole? So she wrote to Srila Prabhupada again and explained, Srila Prabhupada, in this particular deity that you gave me, I noticed that there's a small hole. What should I do with that? And Srila Prabhupada said, I'm paraphrasing, but Srila Prabhupada indicated that it wasn't a serious issue, that she should just use some type of wax to cover that and continue worshiping. So Nandalal worshipped that deity of Krishna that was directly given to her by Srila Prabhupada for many, many years. And she said eventually she also got a small Srimati Radharani deity and was worshiping both of those deities together for many years. So very, very amazing. So when I was introduced to Nandalal, Pita and Parampara said, oh, Shankar Pandit, he's distributing books. So Nandalal appreciated that service. And then she asked me, she said, in the course of your book distribution, did you ever hear that some of the devotees were saying the activity of book distribution is in the mood of the gopis? I said, yes, I heard that many times. Said many of our Sankirtan leaders, authorities, they would say that. So Nandalal said, I heard that also, but I never knew what was the origin of that saying. Was it just devotees' way of inspiring others to distribute literature, or did it come from Srila Prabhupada? So Nandalal asked me if I knew what the origin was, and I said no. So Nandalal, being very, very curious, decided to write Srila Prabhupada a letter and ask him about this particular philosophical point. So she said, Srila Prabhupada wrote back and said, yes, it is correct. Book distribution is in the mood of the gopis. So Nandalal said, because you're distributing books, you can tell everyone, the book distributors, that yes, that preaching is correct because Srila Prabhupada said that. Now, of course, the gopis are the female cowherd girl associates of Sri Krishna. They are considered the topmost devotees of the Lord. Brahmya, Kachit, Upasana, Vraja, Vadu, Vardagena, Yakalpita. There are so many different devotees of Krishna, so many different classifications, all rendering exceptional, pure, loving service. But out of all of these innumerable devotee associates of the Supreme Lord, the gopis stand as being the foremost. And of course, out of all of the gopis, Srimati Radharani is considered the topmost. And Srimati Radharani's mood is such that even though she is so dear to Krishna, she's always making arrangements for others to render loving service to Krishna. So in that respect, the activity of book distribution is in the mood of the gopis in the sense that by giving others literature about Krishna, you're assisting them in going close to Krishna. So Nandalal was very emphatic. She said, yes, this is a correct philosophical point confirmed by Srila Prabhupada himself. So Nandalal, as we've heard from some of the other speakers, was certainly a very, very dynamic personality. And when I met her, I was wearing a devotional attire like this, but I was wearing a beret. And so Nandalal, she noticed the beret. She said, were you in the military? And I said, no, just Lord Chaitanya Sankirtan Army. And then she said this, she shared this with all of us. She said that throughout her life, she had many recurring dreams, visions, that in a past life, she was a military general. And she would be very reflective on her present life because she understood her particular capabilities. Yes, she was extremely resourceful, very intelligent, had leadership qualities. So these are almost qualities of a warrior. And the fact that she somehow was convinced, and she said that. She said, I was convinced that I was a military general in a major battle in a previous life. And I'm now utilizing all of that experience now. So I thought that was very interesting because she spent 20 years in India, and for a single American woman, it's very, very difficult. But yet, by her fierce determination, sincerity, resourcefulness, and of course her love and devotion to Srila Prabhupada, she was able to survive against all odds. So I feel extremely honored that I'm able to attend her memorial service. She was obviously a very, very exceptional devotee. And I think it is noteworthy to mention that Dasrat Sutta Prabhu, who's been her friend for many, many years, sacrificed so much time and energy to be at her hospital bedside. Every now and then, Dasrat Sutta Prabhu and I would talk on the phone, and he would tell me that although Nandalal wasn't externally conscious, she wasn't talking or anything, just basically moving her body slightly. Otherwise, she had feeding tube, everything. Very, very difficult. But Dasrat Sutta had arranged that Srila Prabhupada's chanting of Hare Krishna Kirtan tape was going on 24 hours. He would literally speak, read to her, sometimes 5-6 hours on end. So it is very noteworthy. And also, Sikhi Pichadari Prabhu, it is noteworthy to point out that despite his regular temple service, and even his involvement in Govinda's restaurant, located at Little 5 Points, sometimes after closing Govinda's restaurant at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, he would literally drive the 3 hours from Atlanta to Rome, Georgia, to be at Nandalal's hospital bedside, Kim and Dasrat Sutta. So this is wonderful. It is commendable. It is stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Etavan Sankhya Yogaibhyam Swadharma Parinishtaya Janma Lava Karakumsam Ante Narayana Smriti. That the perfection of our existence, whether we're practicing yoga, whether we're engaged in philosophical, theoretical speculation, if we're very much concerned about our religious duties or family involvement, the perfection of all of our human activities is to cultivate our consciousness in such a way so that at the time of death, we can remember the Supreme Lord. Ante Narayana Smriti. This is the perfection. So, whenever any of our members, Vaishnavas, Vaishnavis, are in an invalid condition and impending death is approaching, as much as possible, we should run and aid that devotee, assist them in making that transition from this particular sphere to another destination. It is very important. So it is extremely commendable these devotees and others were there with Nandalal at the end, assisting her in remembering Srila Prabhupada. So this is something that all of us will have to contend with. Even Srila Prabhupada himself, as he was preparing to depart from this world, he told the assembled devotees, do not think this will not happen to you. So it will happen. Bhajan kar, sadhan kar, murti janmay hoy. Our sadhana, or our devotional practices, our bhajan, our meditation and chanting, etc., all of our devotional or spiritual activities will be tested at the time of death. So therefore, while all of us are still physically able, we must encourage each other, help each other advance in Krishna or God consciousness. So it is very commendable that these devotees sacrifice so much time, energy, looking after Nandalal. So on her behalf, I humbly beseech Srila Prabhupada, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the divine couple Radha and Krishna, that she may bless all of us, and particularly those devotees who looked after her in those very last crucial moments of her life. Hare Krishna.
So, Susan, would you like to say something? Susan is Nandalal's daughter. She came from Utah to be here.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here and to meet all of you people that were her friends. I really appreciate the stories and the memories that you all have. It means a lot to me, and I just want to thank you for it. Okay?
Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much for coming. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.